Cool.
Rightio, we are on. Vanesssa, Bennett, thank you so much for coming on the Luke Farr Show, a show to motivate, educate, and inspire our next generation of leaders. Thank you. We don't need to let them know this is round 2, but candidly, I will. Thank you, though, for coming on.
That's a pleasure. Great to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get stuck right in. You're the CEO and co-founder of Next Evolution Performance. You've recently completed your Masters of Science, Psychology and Neuroscience from King's College in London. Your business is effectively all about high performance people. I mean, for the people out there really that, in layman's terms, what does that mean exactly from your perspective?
Yeah, so high performance is all about making sure that you have really the energy to achieve the goals that are important to you. So it's not success by our definition, it's success as to whatever your definition is, but making sure that you have energy, making sure that from a business point of view, businesses can be more profitable, people have more energy, and I guess kind of just the ability to get through a lot more, but also really focusing on the idea of having it without burnout. So performance needs to be sustainable. So if people are tired, burnt out, having mental health problems, just constantly fatigued, all of that kind of thing, that's not high performance, that's high burnout. So we want to make sure that we're getting the performance up, but really focusing on getting those effort levels down and really optimizing what we call cognitive energy, which is our mental energy. How do we use that so that we don't run out of it and so that we can continue to keep renewing it?
Sure. Sounds good. Let's touch on burnout a little bit. I mean, what does, let's talk about sort of what does well-being look like now post-pandemic? I mean, here in New Zealand alone, 20,000 businesses were wiped off the business register. That was in a 2-year period, and burnout was at an all-time high. What does that well-being word sort of look like right now?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the benchmark is probably a lot lower than what it once was really in terms of people's expectations. But I think, we really do need to take responsibility to get back to what we think of well-being in terms of the ability to be able to deal with the normal stresses of life. This is kind of like mental health generally, right? Like we can deal with the stresses of life. We have the energy to do goals that are meaningful and important to us. And we have the ability to really flourish. It's not just this survival, it's really flourishing. It's the difference between, are you someone that can see an potentially adverse situation as either an obstacle or an opportunity. And, if we're really tired and if we don't have good well-being, it's really hard to see that. And people often think it's just a well-being focus is one thing, but I always say that you can have well-being without high performance, but you can't have high performance without well-being. So, you really need to focus on how you do that, because it makes good business sense. It's not just something that just feels good and it's a physical thing and a health thing. It's something that makes good business sense. If you've got a whole bunch of people who are tired and burnt out, that is not good for business.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And let's talk about sort of signs, symptoms, and also definition of burnout. I mean, for me personally, I always thought burnout was simply just running on a high octane, back-to-back calendar, full tilt ahead. But burnout, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but can also simply be doing a mundane task over and over again and just not enjoying it, but not necessarily stress. So there's a pretty wide spectrum when it comes to the definition of burnout. But what's your take on it, and what's some insights from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think that feeling of going back to back really hard, that's when we've still got a lot of stress going in our body. And stress is not necessarily a bad thing. I always say to people, if your goal is to be stress-free, get a different job, all right? Because, there's going to be stresses in life. It's how we deal with that. And in fact, our brain needs a certain amount of stress to perform at its optimal level. So we shouldn't shy away from stress. We should be embracing it. But it's when that stress gets too much, and that's basically when we overestimate the problem in comparison to underestimating our ability to deal with it, then what happens is we start to get that feeling of, it could be apathy. We just don't enjoy doing what we've been doing before. We're just tired. We've got no interest in things. So it can be a physical burnout in terms of like literally not wanting to get up off the couch. It can be a mental burnout in just losing interest, not being able to work as effectively. It's that kind of situation where you're trying to work on something that should only take you 30 minutes and it's taking you 4 hours, and you're just not really firing on all cylinders. And of course, it's not a binary thing. It's not like you're totally amazing one day and then you're burnt out the next. Like it's a continuum, and there's very much a spectrum where, if you ignore the early warning signs, that's when we get the full level burnout of a mental health problem, a physical problem, including something like adrenal fatigue, where your adrenal system is like literally shut down. It can't even get stressed anymore if you wanted to. It's literally burnt out. Like your cortisol regulation is just non-existent. It can't do its job anymore.
And you mentioned there on the mental health scenario. So what is the telltale signs of whether, so does depression happen before burnout? And then what are the differences between the two? Is there sort of signs and symptoms of depression? Like you said, a task that needs to take 30 minutes, but it's 4 hours. That's someone that potentially is seeing early onset signs of depression. And then if it goes too long, does it hit burnout? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation. So sometimes we have some of the physical effects of burnout, which can lead to the mental impacts of burnout. Sometimes it goes the other way. So we have the mental impacts first, and that manifests itself physically. So there's no sort of one kind of path, I guess, that people go down towards that. But what I would say, when it comes to this mental health, think of it like as a continuum. So you've got mental health and well-being, basically being that we can get through our work, we're being productive, we've got interests, we can get into the flow and enjoy doing certain things. And then mental ill health is the opposite end of the spectrum. So that is when we've officially had a diagnosis, and it could be something like depression, anxiety, panic disorder, something like that. But it's actually very hard to get a diagnosis of depression. Like depression, if you look at the clinical definition, you've got to have something like 2 symptoms from this column, 5 symptoms from this column, 2 symptoms from another column, and for a period of longer than 2 weeks. Like it's actually quite hard to satisfy it. However, just because we don't have a clinical definition doesn't mean that all is well in the kingdom. So I usually kind of explain it to clients in a way that if we're feeling a bit meh, that can kind of be that starting point when all is not well. Okay. And just because we have a meh day doesn't mean that we've got depression, doesn't mean that we will have depression.
No, of course not. We're all humans and we've got a flurry of ups and downs of emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's totally fine to feel meh. I mean, gosh, who hasn't felt meh at some stage in the last 3 years? So, that's totally fine. But the thing is when meh becomes a bit more of a status quo, and that starts to be where you camp out. All right. So if you find that you are there for an extended period of time, then things very rarely just fix themselves. And generally speaking, the next place that you're probably going to go to is somewhere that kind of feels a bit like not great. All right. So again, it's probably in what we call that subsyndromal stage where we don't have a diagnosis, but we've definitely got something going on that's not quite right there, and we need to keep it in check. So, if you're feeling like you can, take on the world and all is good, that's great. If you're feeling a bit meh, fine for a couple of days. But if that starts to go on for an extended period, we probably need to recognize that and then start to take some self-responsibility to say, what do we need to do to get it back and feeling like we've got some good well-being again.
Sure. Sounds good. Good insights there, Vanesssa. As far as you mentioned that sort of 2 week of meh, but at what point should someone start to recognize and then start to intervene with external therapists or help out there before it actually snowballs into a really big problem? Is it, hey, look, 5 days of those meh symptoms. Let's look at that before things can really get quite catastrophic mentally, or when should people know to go seek help?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think in a couple of weeks, you probably want to recognize that something's not quite right, and start to do a bit of reflection of what's going on. And, don't forget, we've had very extreme circumstances. The definition of mental health is being able to cope with the normal stresses of life. And I think it's fair to say we've probably had fairly abnormal stresses in life over the last few years. But that said, people who really take their mental health, and I would go so far as to call it, we want to aim for mental fitness. So mental fitness is probably even going a step ahead of mental health. And when you think about mental fitness, think about that like physical fitness. All right. It's far easier to exercise when you're already fit.
Correct.
And therefore, the longer we leave it to feeling like, I actually don't think that anyone should get to a point physically where it's like, oh, I'm not feeling great, maybe I should go and exercise. It's like, well, maybe if we exercised as a starting point, then maybe you wouldn't get to that stage of not feeling great.
Yeah.
So
preventative versus Band-Aid formula.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a big believer in taking a lot of care and treating our physical fitness with the respect it deserves, and dealing with that as something that we shouldn't let it become a problem before we do something about it. And it's really the same thing with our mental fitness. And now we know that the two are both very much linked as well. So, it seems very weird that we would take care of physical fitness without taking care of mental fitness. And so mental fitness is really, choosing, like being, I guess, reflective about how we're thinking about things, and really starting to be in a position where if you're already fit, it's far easier to choose your thinking about certain things. But if you're not mentally fit, that's like telling a couch potato to go for a run, they'll feel amazing. Like you'll kill them. It doesn't work that way. So it's far easier to
but a slow walk's okay.
That's right.
Ease into it,
Exactly.
Like don't keep doing nothing, but just you're obviously not running is not quite probably going to work out for you at this point.
That's right, exactly. And so I think it's recognizing where you are in terms of that level of mental fitness. Just like we can get a couch potato and a 10K runner to both run a marathon, but the training plans will be very different. One is literally put your shoes on and go for a walk. The other is we'll go from 10Ks to 12Ks and do that. So, there's very different training plans.
And Ned Brockman would say go from Perth to Bondi and run 100K a day. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's someone who would be very fit on that front. Absolutely. We're probably not all going to go, oh, I want to improve my fitness. I know, I'll run from Perth to Sydney. That sounds like it'll do the trick. I think you've got to, have a bit of extra training around that.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as like what are you seeing in Australia? I mean, there's huge campaigns all around mental health awareness week, and big campaigns going on here in New Zealand. I mean, what's your take, and what is it like in Australia? And also, do you feel as though there's still quite a tall poppy syndrome there in Australia, like there is here in New Zealand? And what are you seeing there in the mental health space in Australia?
I'm actually pretty happy with, it's not perfect and we haven't got it completely sorted by any stretch of the imagination, don't get me wrong, but I think in terms of the awareness and in terms of the ability for people to now talk about mental health, we have come along in leaps and bounds. And I think the pandemic has probably even accelerated that over the last 3 years compared to even, say, the last 10 years. So I think, that's one of the good things that has come out of this in terms of reducing the stigma and being able to talk about it. And I think, and to be fair, I think Australia and New Zealand are actually kind of leading the charge on this. We've got clients overseas as well, and there is still a lot of that angle around, we need to focus on the performance piece. And it's really interesting, and we've always done that at Next Evolution Performance. It's very much a case of, don't put us in the well-being bucket. This is, make no mistake, this is a performance piece. But I think what's really interesting now is that People are now
Sorry to
seeing
interrupt you
this.
there. Sorry to interrupt you
Yeah.
there, Vanessa. But what's the difference of that? So when clients are putting you into that bucket, what is the significant difference of the two?
Yeah. So the well-being bucket, even 10 years ago, used to be that kind of nice to have, tick a box, let's do a lunch and learn, and then we've kind of got this thing sorted.
A whole bunch of fluff and a couple of budgets going into stuff just to tick the
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And so the way that we approach all of this is very much performance based. We talk about cognitive energy, we talk about getting more done in less time and giving an extra 2 hours per day of effective time. We talk about it from reducing sick leave, reducing mental health leave. We do it from effectiveness. So we do this very much like there is absolutely a return on investment in terms of making sure that people are firing on all cylinders. So that's still to this day the angle that we really approach this on. But in Venice, I think 10 years ago, we really wanted to be there because we knew that the well-being budgets would always be cut when push came to shove, because it was a nice and fluffy thing to have. I think what is a bit of a difference now is that kind of thing now is people are now seeing that it is linked to performance. And therefore, there is definitely this movement to, we do actually need to focus on this for the performance piece. So I think there's definitely a shift there, which is really nice to see. I think globally, they're still a bit behind on that. They're still very much like, hey, let's make it very much a performance piece and don't let it be caught in the nice to have kind of thing. So I think there's still a bit of a shift there. So I think there's definitely Australia and New Zealand are doing pretty well in terms of raising that awareness. But I think we still need to focus more on really helping people to take responsibility for this. Now it's almost like what I don't want to see is we're going the opposite way, where it's become so accepted these days that, people kind of pull that card. It's like, how long can we really pull this pandemic card for? Like that kind of thing, and so I know that, I don't know, I don't want this to sound harsh, because I know that, there are people with
you're in
genuine
high
issues.
performance, so it's okay if it sounds
That's right.
harsh, right? It's hard to hear.
It is hard to hear, and I just think, out of all the people that are diagnosed with mental health issues, so many of them would have been avoidable. Now, there are some that aren't, and I totally get that. So before everyone writes in with da 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 da, you don't understand, it's like, you know what? I've been there myself and got myself out of it, never been there again. So there's certain things that we can take responsibility for.
Are you happy to talk about that? Like what got you into it, what got you out of it, and how bad was it for you?
So, gosh, this was like what feels like 100 years ago now, thank goodness, and I'm happy that
You
it
don't
was.
look that old, but if you are, you're looking great. Yeah, must be that fitness trainer stuff you do for #FitnessFirst.
Yeah, see, that stuff works. And so I had a small period in my life where I had the trifecta: depression, anxiety, panic disorder.
Wow.
And it was awful. So I get that this is awful. So before, you get everyone go, you don't understand. It's like, yeah, actually, I do. All right. But I also,
what brought it on for you?
Yeah, it was situational, which happens to a lot of us. And so the thing is, it's like, this idea of resilience, and mental fitness is beyond resilience, right? So mental fitness is where we've got resilience, but we've got hope, we've got self-efficacy, we've got confidence, we've got optimism. And the thing is, a lot of that can be taught. All right. And so we can do a lot of these things to do that. Now, back when I had all of this, like, that was not a thing that we built. The old school way of thinking was resilience is something that you build when you have an adverse experience. And you couldn't do anything before then. Until you've had something bad happen, you can't build resilience. Whereas I go, no, that's not right. Okay, so now we know more about this concept of neuroplasticity. We can actually build this way of thinking so that we're more cognizant of it, so that we can choose to do more of that. So I came from an experience where, what caused it for me was I had a number of things that just didn't go my way all at once. And so basically, life happened. Work was great, but, life happened and it got quite hard at that point. So,
So you mentioned there was situation. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
But so were you all still doing all the right things, i.e., good nutrition, good fitness?
I was doing all the physical things, but we
Right.
didn't know about mental fitness training at that point.
Oh,
So
okay.
that was still pretty new in the scheme of things. Neuroplasticity was the brain's ability to change itself and to change neural pathways, was still pretty newish in the scheme of things. And I was much younger, so I didn't know much about it. And I think this idea of, a lot of people go through that and they don't have resilience because they've never needed it. So I came from a situation where I did not have a bad childhood, quite the opposite. All right. My parents still have date night, after 50 years of marriage. I went to all the good schools, I got the great jobs I wanted, like everything went according to plan. So it never crossed my mind that life wouldn't go my way.
You had the fairy tale story.
I had, exactly.
So where did it all fuck up? Excuse my French.
That's right. And so all of a sudden things didn't go quite according to plan. And when I look back now, it's kind of like, oh, I would deal with those things easily. But when all of them happen at once and you haven't kind of built any resilience to deal with that because you didn't think that you needed it, then all of a sudden that could be a problem. And so I did a lot of, that probably sort of prompted my interest in a lot of this space as well. I've always been very much on the physical side of things, being very healthy and productive. And even back then, like these days, you see people like, talking about how they're staying fit and healthy and what they do during the day to keep their mind really productive by exercising and doing all this kind of stuff. Whereas 20 years ago, people would like look at other people who went out to exercise as lunch as though they were wasting time. Like the whole mindset's changed. We've got a lot more.
The whole paradigm shifted. I mean, there's a really great quote from Alice Miller. I don't know if you've heard the quote, but he says, genuine feelings cannot be produced, nor can they be eradicated, but the body sticks to the facts.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Totally. Body sticks to the facts. There's a great book, The Body Keeps Score. And, the body knows a lot more than what we realize is going on for us mentally. And I've always been a big believer in that. And so I've always, made sure that my physical fitness was given priority regardless of my work situation. And I'm so glad that it did, but we didn't have all the research back then to back it up. All I had was, well, I better keep delivering results so that I can still keep doing this or I might lose my job. That was literally, kind of the way of thinking. And so long as I delivered results, I was okay. So that's probably why I'm so results focused.
Probably. I mean, how bad did the panic disorder get, Vanesssa? I mean, was it, did certain environments trigger it or?
Yeah. So for me, some people it manifests, and it manifests in different ways. Some people it's agoraphobia, not wanting to go outside in large spaces. That wasn't really a thing for me. Mine was sort of like more small spaces. Like I didn't like driving in tunnels, especially if traffic got bad. I didn't like being in elevators, all of those kind of things. So that's quite debilitating when you work in a high-rise building and, you've got to travel in tunnels to get anywhere in Sydney. So that was kind of annoying.
Correct. That would have been. And what tools did you have up your sleeve after a while to cope with that? I mean, were you, for example, going through a full-blown panic attack every time you go through a tunnel or every time you're in an elevator, or?
Almost.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was awful.
And then like what, some breathing techniques helped or any?
Yeah. Breathing is the only way you can really get yourself out of it, because you can't control the mind with the mind. You can only control your mind with your body from a physiological perspective to get you into that stage of thinking rationally again. So that's why breathing, and it doesn't matter whether it's, we're talking about panic attacks, but just even stresses during the day at work. We want people to be able to breathe with their diaphragm, really deep belly breathing to be able to reset what we call the prefrontal cortex so that it can think rationally again. When we get into that stress mode, we cannot think rationally. So people go, oh, you just got to think more clearly about it. It's like, well, physiologically you can't. So that's a really dumb thing to say at that point in time. So you need to make sure that you're focusing on the breathing, get the breathing right, then you get back control of the prefrontal cortex, and then you can work out how to think rationally about the situation. So that goes for anyone, really. So that's a really great tool to give to anyone.
And I always found I had panic attacks quite viciously in my younger years, but I I saw a breathing doctor, but I found I'm not sure if you're aware of the alternative nostril breathing.
Yeah, that's really good.
In through the left, out through the other one, and then back in. But then because your brain has to focus on it. And so when you're doing the thumb one like that.
Yeah.
And so you're thinking whilst doing it, but then you do the pauses and then the exhales are great. That's not great for people that have nostril or nasal issues, FYI.
That's me. Yes.
Yeah.
So
for anyone that has a deviated septum, it's not quite going to work.
I've got all of that. So yes, I don't tend to do that one, but different breathing works for different people. And so it's find whatever works for you and roll with that.
What's your favorite one?
For me, it's just in for 5, out for 5 with the diaphragm. Yep. I don't have to want to think about, how much I'm breathing in for and out for. And some people talk about box breathing, which is the breathe in and the hold and the out and the hold. Again, anyone that's ever had panic attacks, you tell them to hold their breath, they think they're going to die. So don't do that. So if box breathing works for you, do it. But if it doesn't, let it go. It's fine. Don't do it.
5, 5, 5, 5. Yeah. In for 5, out for 5. Simple.
Out for 5.
But also it's all through nose, right? Keep the mouth shut.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, very good. Right, we're going to do a little small segue here, and this is very interesting, but probably touching on more of the ego. So bear with me. So I'm just going to do like a scenario, right? From singles that are dating and a woman or man showing interest, and generally the recipient might tend to run for the hills, however, enjoys it when one shows little interest and the chase begins. And then similar to sales, when a BDM or someone doing cold calling and they're following up with a potential client and calls too many times and the prospect loses interest due to the neediness and, for lack of a better term, desperado. Why do you think humans like to be chased and shown interest? Is this something to do with how our egos operate? I mean, what is this whole game that we're playing with ourselves?
Oh gosh, that's a big question.
There was a lot to unpack there, but
there was a lot to unpack there.
Someone that's in neuroscience, you might have some answers. And I'm not saying this is from me. This is from a friend, by the way.
Asking for a friend. Love that.
Yeah.
That comes down to, like you say, ego, really. It feels good for people to show an interest in us in some way, shape or form. And I think it's also, there's a phenomenon called the mere exposure effect, where we actually think we like things that become more familiar to us. So there's a bit of that going on there as well. But I just think that, in any part of life, whether it's work, whether it's life, I like this idea of just add value. If you add value to other people, the right things will happen. If you're not adding value to other people, things don't happen that way. So
even if you're adding value too much and too consistently and you're really into someone and then they're like, oh, you know what, this is all too easy. I want someone that's hard to get, or why do we want a challenge? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm way past that in the dating scheme of things. So I'm over that.
Yeah, but sometimes it relates to business. I mean, I'm a salesman, and there's sort of certain techniques, right? You play the indifference approach, or you show your client that, look, I don't know, you give them space, and that's it. There's some similarities there anyway.
Yeah. But I'm pretty simple on that one. Add value, and if people like my value, then they're my people. And if people don't value what I think that is good value for other people, then that's okay too. There's plenty more people who will.
I think that's a good technique. I read that, but that's got that technique, the KISS technique, right? Like, keep it simple, stupid. Don't overcomplicate it. That's good. I got another great quote here from Daniel Kays, which I'd love your feedback on. He says, I don't know what's worse, to now know what you are and be happy, or to become what you've always wanted to be and feel alone, which I find quite interesting and potentially paradoxical. But what's your take on that one?
I think happiness is a journey. It's not a destination. And I think, we can choose a lot more happiness than we realize. Often we think that we've got to get to there and then I'll be happy. But the whole idea is if you are happy now, you've probably got more chance of getting to there, which is the irony about all of that.
That is the irony. And I mean, how can one find contentment? Because in the hustle that we're always chasing the next best thing, and the ladder keeps getting longer, and then it's that not the destination. It is the journey, as cliche as it is, but often we find it hard to be grateful in that journey moment until we reach that next, like, quote unquote milestone, right?
Yeah, and I think I really like the idea of taking imperfect action. So if we can feel like we're actually making progress towards something, actually research has shown that if we feel like we're moving towards something and making progress, that's actually just as fulfilling as getting there and making the destination. So if we can make sure that we keep purpose in what we do, and I think I love this idea of, I always talk to my clients about a to-do list, not just a to-do list. So rather, the to-do list is helping you to focus on what hasn't been done, what you don't have, what you haven't achieved yet. Whereas if you give enough energy to the to-do list, this is, how far I've come. Think about where you were 2 years ago and think about how far you've come now. And let's just take a moment to be excited by that. And if you give, it's a great mental fitness tool, actually. If you can really be grateful for where you are now, think about what you've done well to get you where you are now and what you're doing to get you further on that journey, progressing forward. So long as you're on that journey, you don't actually have to be there, but just taking baby steps along that journey. And I think a lot of people kind of get stuck around, I can't do something until it's perfect. And it's like, no, you just start, you just do stuff. And then that's how you get better at it. And then you just do more of it. And then you end up getting to where you want to be. So I think very much on a daily basis, what went well today, what went well in the last week, what am I grateful for? Like all of these kind of really simple things are great tools, because you can't technically have a negative thought at the same time as you have a positive thought. So yeah, it's not possible. Give it a go. Try it right now.
Okay, I will. Just give me two moments there. Just go about 30 seconds. Okay, what am I thinking about? Well, I'm really just thinking about my next question, really. But you've just given me some great buffer room, actually. But no, that's interesting. Yeah, because often I'm in the brain of probably not more. To be fair, I sort of more tend to go, and I've recognised it though. I tend to probably do drift into pessimistic brain. What could be better? What like that? That's the ego, just the chase monkey chatter brain. But then I've learned to get better at being grateful. And you're right. It's as soon as you start practicing that gratitude, that monkey brain quiets down, and it does get better. Hey, I want to talk about your faith in humanity. There's a lot of pain and suffering going on in the world, as we all know. I mean, have you got faith in humanity, Vanesssa?
I do, in that.
That's a no.
Like, no, two aspects of that.
Sorry.
I have faith in humanity in that, so many times we get this negative thinking, and especially like I do a lot of work in the corporate market. So, I see, how people interact with each other and how they behave with each other and all that kind of stuff. And, sometimes there's a lot of negativity and people are like, oh, but, that person said something or made me feel a certain way. And it's like, I don't believe anyone wakes up thinking, how do I make someone else's life hard today? Like I have faith in humanity that that's not a thing. And so I think if you go through and expect to see good in people and to experience the good in people, I feel like you get more of that. I think if we, don't read into things that aren't there, right? So I think that's an important thing. So I definitely have faith in humanity in terms of actually, not wanting to be awful to other people. And I think that's a pretty key part. What I do find though is that people's personal responsibility and their personal accountability, I've always found that to be pretty low on average. And I feel like, whether it's just because people are tired and it's after the pandemic, I feel like personal responsibility for so many people is at an all-time low. It's like, I'm really tired. It's my boss's fault. This person made me feel a certain way.
Like, they're being the victim.
Yeah, that's right. It's this victim thinking. It's the government's fault. It's this person's fault. It's that fault. It's the pandemic's fault. It's everyone else's fault. And I know that there has been a lot of hard things going on. I totally respect that. It has been a very hard time for a lot of people.
But
and
we've got it.
think,
What would you try and say really is we need to stop playing the blame game and be accountable ourselves and take ownership within.
yeah, because you'll have people in exactly the same situation, and they've handled it differently. So it's evidence to say that we can do things differently. We can choose to think differently. We can go, okay, that's not working. I'm going to take responsibility to try something else. And that level of responsibility, again, it's 10% of people see things as opportunities that 90% of people will see as obstacles. So I think that level of personal responsibility about, well, yeah, things have not always been great over the last few years. It's been incredibly challenging. But then taking it and saying, right, well, what choices do I still have? And they might not be the initial choices that you first thought, but there's still some choices to be had. And how do we work with that? So I think there's, what I am concerned with humanity is this lack of personal accountability. I have a mental health problem. It's everyone else's fault. Well, actually epigenetics shows that we just have to stop blaming our parents on that now.
Absolutely. Take accountability and go and fix it effectively. I do want to touch about, you mentioned there earlier, yeah, I do agree. When people wake up in the morning and then think, or potentially think, hey, how can I make someone else's day really bad? But I do think also they and you'd have to agree, they're more so, they're projecting their own pain in their life onto someone else, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Any
it's not
form
like
of negative
they're
behavior.
thinking, oh, how can I make someone's day bad? But they're going, right, if I bring this person down, hopefully that might potentially make me feel better.
Yeah, that's right. Because misery loves company. And, I think any form of negative behavior is really just a reflection for what's going on for that person. It's got nothing to do with the unfortunate recipient of that negative behavior.
Nice. Great insights. All right, that's a wrap there. Hey, Vanesssa Bennett from Next Evolution Performance. Thank you so much for coming on the Luke Farr Show, a show to motivate, educate, and inspire our next generation of leaders. Thank you so much. And where can people find more about Next Evolution Performance?
Yeah, absolutely. Jump onto our website, nextevolutionperformance.com. And there is a bucket load of information on there. And if you want to engage with us on a regular basis, we've just started doing on the first Wednesday of every month. Check our website for time zones under the events section. We call it our 2020 series, 20 minutes where we just riff about content on some topic of high performance, and 20 minutes where people get to ask us questions live. So pop us on the spot, jump online and get involved. So we always love having people hit us up with the harder questions. So yeah, another great way to do that. So check out the events section of our website, but there's a bucket load of information on nextevolutionperformance.com, and I'm very easy to stalk on social media. Follow me on LinkedIn. That's my main platform, Vanesssa Bennett, and would love to see everyone there.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you so much. And hey, let me know if you need a host for those shows.
Thank you. We might need to when we've got so many people that want to have a chat about things. We might need to rein it in.
Sorry, a caveat. I do come at a pretty high fee. The show's no amateur. I've had Joe Rogan's guests on. So the host comes at a cost, but I'm sure you could factor that into your marketing budgets.
Exactly. I'm sure we'll work on that.
Hey, thank you, Vanesssa. I'll just wrap this up. And,